You were strong, brave, selfless, generous, and kind. But most of all, you are love, pure love, and whatever it is you need to get from this, you'll get it. You'll get it, and you'll soar and be even more of all the amazing things you are. Those were the words from a text message that I received from my best friend the day that I found myself sitting in a Nashville admitting room at a hospital in 2019. She knew I needed to hear those words because I was weak, I was very sick, and I was losing my eyesight by the minute. This wasn't the first or even second time I'd experienced something like this. And I don't think it matters how many times I experience something like this. I think the pain and the sadness that ripple throughout my body when I do will always be felt the same. For the last 12 years, I've been living with a rare autoimmune disease called neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder. In short, this is a disease of the central nervous system. It can cause blindness, paralysis, and even death. When I was 21 years old, I woke up one morning to find that the entire left side of my face hurt so badly that I thought I had been entered into a boxing tournament without any gloves. I was certain that when I went to the bathroom to look in the mirror that I was going to see blood, but I didn't. I didn't see blood, bruising, or even swelling. What I did see was something more unusual. I noticed that the entire left side of my face and my entire eye was dilated. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before, and I knew I was in excruciating pain. Looking up, down, left, or right caused this radiating pain sent to the back of my eye. It felt like knives. I knew I had an emergency on my hands, and at the ER, the attending physician learned of my symptoms, and she was concerned but also rather intrigued. She said before she ran the standard test, she would like to do something a little more unusual. She first asked that I cover my left eye, and then she held up 2 dry erase markers, one with a black cap and one with a red cap. All that she asked that I do was identify the color of the markers as she held them up. I thought she was joking at first, but then she asked me to cover my right eye. I was shocked at what I was able to see. I was shocked at what I wasn't able to see. That red marker that looked so vividly red in my right eye no longer looked red in my left eye. It looked brown. And not only that, everything seemed to be blurry. It seemed as if someone had draped a blanket of fog over my eye. When I told the doctor what it was I was able to see, she said that she thought she had a hunch. She thought I had something called optic neuritis. She explained that optic neuritis is inflammation of my optic nerve, and she would need to run some legitimate tests to determine whether or not she was right. But if she was right, it would explain why I had so much pain in my eye and why I could no longer see colors correctly. She was right. Tests and scans showed that I did indeed have optic neuritis. Scans of my brain, my spine, and a sample of my spinal fluid showed that I had abnormalities there as well. Being on the receiving end of news like that turned my world upside down. When you're young, you feel invincible. And for the first time in my life, I knew what it felt to feel fragile, to feel small. A few weeks before this happened, I went to bed as someone who was healthy, and I woke up as someone who would never be healthy again. This wasn't the way I painted the picture of my life. This wasn't the way the story was supposed to go. Nobody could tell me what my life was going to look like 5, 10, or even 15 years down the line. I had entered this uncharted territory of the unknown. How do you plan for your future when the future looks so uncertain? I had just moved out of my parents' house. I just got married and just started my new career. I couldn't believe that this was happening. Years down the line became a roller coaster of attack after attack. It felt like I was on a roller coaster of ups and downs. The medications that were supposed to work, they weren't working. I felt like I was being held hostage inside this body that had betrayed me. I felt trapped. And when I felt trapped, I fought. I fought this war inside my mind that I didn't want anyone to ever know about. This war, this battle between my thoughts, these thoughts that became my beliefs, the beliefs that my life could never be good again. These beliefs that medications aren't working, so I must have done something to cause this. And because I'm the cause, I'm deserving of this. I tried my best to hide my pain, my rage, my sadness from everyone. On the inside, I was crumbling. But on the outside, I would reassure everyone that I'm fine. It's okay. I'm okay. But it wasn't okay. I was not okay. I worried every day about when the next attack would happen, what would be taken from me next. I remember for years at night, I'd lie in bed and I'd get as still as I could be. I'd check the vision in each of my eyes. I'd move my arms. I'd move my fingers. I'd move my legs and wiggle my toes. I had the same routine every morning too. It was almost as if I was doing a body scan, taking an inventory of the things that still worked because I never knew what I was going to wake up without. I got the answer to that question in the fall of 2016. I woke up one morning and I didn't need to do a body scan. I knew immediately what was wrong. That same familiar, unmistakable eye pain that had plagued my left eye for years and left me permanently blind was now happening in my right eye. I was 29 and a mom of 3 at the time, and I couldn't believe that I had been blindsided. How was I going to tell my children that their mommy could no longer see to cook, drive them to school, braid their hair, take care of them, and do the things I had done just a few days prior? I didn't know how they were going to understand. That was the hardest conversation I've ever had to have. But the hardest part of that conversation for me was not being able to see their faces clearly. I didn't know if I would ever be able to see their faces clearly again. I always thought in the back of my mind that this was something that could potentially happen, but it was my worst case scenario to be blind. I thought I had more time than this, and I didn't. I'd been blindsided. Throughout the months that followed, my husband and my children became my lifelines between everything I was once able to do and that I could no longer do now. Things that most people wouldn't even think of became huge hurdles for me. I had to have a place for everything in the house because if I didn't, I couldn't find it. Things like picking out clothes, that became a huge challenge as well because I lost so much of my color vision I couldn't remember what color my shirts were. Eating was difficult too because what may have once looked like a green salad didn't now. It looked brown and I just couldn't eat something that looked like that. Life was incredibly difficult. On the really tough days, and there were a lot, I remember I would ask my husband to describe the people and places I miss seeing so much because I never wanted to forget them. I wanted to etch those memories in my mind so that it would be impossible to forget. I'd ask him about the details of my son's beautiful green eyes, my daughter's sun-kissed blonde hair, the seriously beautiful sunsets that happen over Nashville, and the really small things too, like what the dew looks like in the morning when it rests and those perfectly placed little droplets on blades of grass, the really small things. That's what I wanted him to describe. That's what I wanted to reimagine. At a time when I felt completely isolated and alone, those were the things that brought me the most comfort. I missed seeing my life. That life that I thought could never be good was what I missed the most. 8 long, very dull and blurry months went by, but then I began to notice some subtle improvements in my sight. Things like colors became a little more vivid. Certainly not like they had been before, but I was noticing some improvements. Then I started to notice some improvements in my clarity as well. Images were a little bit sharper. And nearly as soon as I started to see these subtle improvements in my sight, something else miraculous happened within my body. I can only describe it as this divine bolt of creativity. It rushed through my body and it felt like lightning. I'd never experienced anything like this before. It was this urgency to create. I told my husband that day that I needed to go to the art store because I needed to pick out paint, canvas, brushes. I was emphatic that we go right away because I was going to paint something. Now, if this sounds bizarre and a little crazy, I know it does, but for a moment, if you could, just imagine what this felt like in my body. Prior to losing my eyesight, I couldn't draw a stick figure. I didn't know anything about art composition or color theory. I just knew I had to paint. I felt like I had been gifted something amazing from what I once considered a nightmare. I began to paint, and this process of creating, even though it was foreign, it also felt sacred. It felt like something outside of me was moving through me. It felt like the pain of all those years that I had spent wondering why this was happening to me. It finally had an outlet. My pain had a purpose. Painting was far more than just putting paint on a canvas. For me, it represented the bigger picture of my life. I felt bold and empowered when I held my paintbrush. I was able to view a blank canvas for its possibilities and then imagine and create what I wanted in my mind and then transfer that to a canvas. Painting connected so many dots for me between the bigger picture of my life and my artistry. I have always been the visionary and the artist of my life, but it took losing my eyesight for me to see that I always have been. I think so many of us abandon our paintbrushes along the way when life gets hard. I know I did. But we lose the message that life is offering to us when we leave our paintbrushes in the hands of circumstances or even other people. We may not be able to control everything that life hands to us, but we are always in control of our paintbrushes. I've had curveballs thrown my way that I never saw coming. I've lost my eyesight and been functionally blind more times than I care to count. I lost my ability to walk. I taught myself how to walk again, and gratefully I'm able to move today. Living with an unpredictable, rare, aggressive disease has challenged everything I thought I knew about myself and my life. I've learned that you can feel fear down to your very bones and still move forward and live. I know that I am not the cause of this disease because I no longer paint myself as the victim of my story. I am the hero who holds a paintbrush, and you can be too. I've learned that my life is good. It was good all of those years ago as well. I just wasn't able to see it, and it's good today. My husband and I have been married for 13 years. We've adopted 5 beautiful, remarkable, resilient children. I'm an advocate for rare disease patients just like me who deserve to have their stories told and voices heard. And I'm an artist. I never stopped painting, and I never will. We get this one beautiful, messy, glorious life. It's gonna hand us challenges that we think are impossible, too painful to overcome. Let it hurt, but don't lose the hope that's always available to you. Hang on to your paintbrush and keep your eyes focused on the masterpiece that you're creating. From one artist to another, happy painting.